What's up, guys? Episode 26. We are live with Ray Strack, CEO of Shasta Grown. He's a great guy that I've known since I was a kid, and his company is also phenomenal. They are having, super great impact on the people of Weed, California, which is, aptly, ironically, named for his legal grow for ganja. And so we get into that, the economic sustainability behind his company. We get into the employment opportunities that they're bringing to the people in this area, and really just everything else in between. So, ton of great work done by him and his company. I really like it a lot. So, stay tuned. Savage Talks podcast going live. Thanks for the time. Peace. So, I guess you want to talk about moving to Japan, like the cultural shock, and then do you think that helped you for the better kind of thing?
It definitely made me realize like how insular, especially a place like Breezy was growing
Mm,
up. So many people from New York City never leave New York,
mm,
and like so many people from elsewhere in the world want to go to New York.
mm,
That having left and having realized how insular that bubble was made me much more inclined to strike out on my own and like just find a place that fit me, as opposed to like, when I moved back to the United States in 2005 to go to college, like I knew from the minute I set foot back in Florida to go to UF that there
mm.
was no way I was staying in Florida. Like
Yeah.
I just knew that for a lot of reasons.
Mm,
Having been arrested during college for possession of controlled substance made me want to go to a place where my lifestyle was not criminalized, which obviously factored huge into the decision to move to California.
mm,
And but yeah, listen, I'm a really lucky guy. I've had a lot of amazing experiences in my life, but moving to Japan at 15 and experiencing that international scale and going to a world city as an adult or a young adult was, it really made me more inclined, like I said, to strike out on my own. My dad, he's one of seven, and he's the only one that left. Right,
mm.
he's the only one that left. The rest of them are either still in Breezy or Long Island.
Yeah.
So that, having had that ingrained that like, there's better places out there, and you got to find somewhere that you're going to be able to find your bliss type thing, your ikigai, as the Japanese say.
Mhm.
It was definitely a kind of a, it was a what do you say? It sort of yeah, made me more inclined to not become attached to places that I knew weren't for me, whereas a lot of people just get sedentary and comfortable in their patterns and choose not to leave,
Mm.
which, that works, but it didn't work. It wasn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Now,
mean,
the flip side of that is I've been in the same small town of 2,500 people for 10 years, and I'm pretty sure I'm staying here forever. Right.
mm,
So it's a dualism.
mm. I think you kind of hit an age where like you really started like putting down roots, and then the business opportunity, like that's even more roots. And so it's the combination of, I think that the age was right to settle down at XYZ location, and then clearly the business opportunity is also playing a large factor, I assume.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also have a beautiful home on 5 acres that backs up to the national forest. So, like,
Mm,
this was what I always envisioned, even if I didn't know exactly what it looked like. Once I got here, it was like a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was like, oh, okay, here's the place I think I could stay for a while in.
mm,
You know, I almost left when regulations were coming down the gauntlet in California, and we didn't know what the regulated marketplace was going to look like. We didn't know what the ability to obtain permits was going to look like. I almost took a job in Las Vegas
mm,
as a it was COO or some sort of director of operations type position at like a big recreational operation in Las Vegas. But having grown up in New York, having lived in Tokyo, I was just burnt out on urban centers, quite
mm.
frankly. I didn't want to live in a city. I like living out in the country.
Yeah. And you have Mount Shasta in the background?
Yeah, that's the mountain that you saw in the deck. I can,
Mm,
unfortunately, it's sort of obscured by clouds. Otherwise, I would show you what it looks like,
mm,
but it's not. But yeah, that picture on my Facebook thing, that's Mount Shasta. It's a 14,000 plus foot. It's called the stratovolcano. Is
mm,
the volcanology phrase? I believe I'm getting that right.
mm,
Yeah. It's gorgeous, man. They call it the crown jewel of Northern California, and it
mm,
really is. It's so different from like the Sierras or the Trinity Alps, where they're kind of mountain chains. This
mm,
is like just a solitary, enormous mountain that rises between three different valley floors, and it's
mm.
just kind of by itself.
Is that similar to Mount Fuji? in terms
It
of
is
yeah.
absolutely analogous. It's the
Yeah.
same. It's part of the same Ring of Fire, right? The volcanic chain that goes from Japan, the Aleutians, and down.
Mm,
It is the second southernmost volcano in the Ring of Fire, Lassen being this more southernmost. And yeah, it's incredibly analogous. We have a lot of Japanese tourists who come to visit Mount Shasta because it's so similar to Fuji.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely like being in Colorado and stuff to that. It it really makes, the grand scheme of things seem a lot smaller, right? Like, just it makes you feel like a smaller, just ant, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
nice background in terms of just, oh, I'm not shit. Like, where like in a city, you're like, yeah, yeah, people made that. Like, not me, but people made that, and so like you kind
Right.
of, it's
So
it's a lot
humans,
more
yeah.
egocentric.
No, it really the geologic scale that you get when you can see like okay, if I go to the right place in this county, I can see three different mountain chains
Mm,
that are obviously millions of years old, but even within the mountain chains, one is millions of years older than the other.
mm,
And they're different. They're formed by different geologic forces. They're formed by different, volcano type forces, like I said,
mm.
and water and glaciers. And, it really does. It provides a sort of a context of life that makes you realize, like, yeah, you ain't shit. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think that's good. I think that's good in life. Um,
I agree. Absolutely.
so and then so now you also had a travel job with the music industry. Do you want to kind of talk into that a little bit, because I think all of that really like sets the frame for you, becoming a CEO and having people trust in you to run the business.
Yeah, so I was very very blessed to work under some absolute OGs in the music industry, particularly within the site operations and operations management sphere. So not I wasn't an audio guy, I wasn't a lighting guy, I wasn't a tech guy.
Mm,
We were the nuts and bolts guys, right? We were the figure out, a music producer would come to us with a project and they'd say, hey, we have this opportunity to lease this piece of land for 10 days. Here's the municipal code for live events for over 10,000 people. Let's figure out how we can develop a site plan that works to get the permit, because you have to, any event that large, you got to get a permit from either the county or the city.
mm,
And so that was really interesting. It gave me an early insight into land use code and how businesses are hamstrung or governed by jurisdictional governance code. Um, I didn't want to live on the road that many weeks a year. I knew that very, very immediately, but it was just such a great opportunity. And I was able to parlay a lot of that knowledge base into an operations coordinations gig at a 115,000 square foot visual effects facility,
mm,
where a lot of the same roles and responsibilities came into play, albeit on a more annualized, on a 9 to 5 basis, as opposed to like, okay, you're going to be somewhere you're going to be somewhere on site for 3 weeks, and then you get a week off, and then you're on a different site in a different part of the country for another 3 weeks, and then you get a week off. And so the work schedule is just different. It's I also saw an opportunity to learn about that industry because I really didn't know anything about it. And so, I thought at the time, heck, it can't hurt to learn. So
yeah.
that was, and honestly, a lot of what I learned at that facility, as part of my responsibilities, was overseeing like um, the train TRANE, the HVAC system.
Mm,
So like I got certified on industrial HVAC, fire suppression systems for data room centers, right? And environmental controls for data rooms, which are like incredibly attenuated,
mm,
backup generator systems for data security in the event of power outages and stuff like that. So a lot of the heavy duty infrastructure of a building of that size, I was able to learn about.
mm,
And all of that stuff has now become incredibly, incredibly important when we're doing facility design and long term of running the facility up here,
mm,
because it's going to be several 100,000 square foot of buildings scattered across basically a it's 60 acres, but we only have plans for about 40 of it. There's 20 acres that have a degree of topographical undulation that just sort of make them useless.
mm.
I mean, not useless, but it would cost millions of dollars to level. And quite frankly, it's perhaps we'll do something with it down the road. But as it stands right now, we've got basically a 3-phase facility design that utilizes all the flat land first, and then
Mm.
we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess just to like fully introduce who you are as a person, you're CEO of
Yeah.
Shasta Grown,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the
That's me.
process, do you what process are you currently in terms of like funding?
Yeah. So we're in the middle of fundraising. We're also simultaneously we're doing what's called the California Environmental Quality Assessment, which is a mandated environmental review for a development project this large in the state
Mm,
of California. In fact, hopefully in the next 72 hours, we're going to get the drone survey done. The surveyor and engineer were out there. I was out there with them the other week, like plotting all the corners. So when they do a drone survey, they like plug in all the GPS coordinates to create a grid system and then send the drone on its way.
mm.
When we get that back, we'll sort of utilize the drainage calculations. And I'm really sorry if my dogs start barking. There's deer in the yard,
It's okay.
so just I'll mute it if it
It's
goes
all
down.
nature.
But I just saw my dog's head pop up, and I saw a deer go by the window, and I was like, oh man, here it goes. Um, and yeah, so right now so it's kind of simultaneous parallel tracks where we're doing everything we can to incrementally de-risk the investment as well as get the project closer to what they call shovel ready. So
Mm,
like, as soon as we get construction financing, boots on the ground, start building. And that's, there's still several months of work. And then simultaneous to that, raising the funds through a blend of equity and debt mechanisms to actually build out the facility, which is effectively, it's going to be somewhere north of like $65 million construction
it's all good.
over a couple of years. One moment. Dog
It's
life,
okay.
man.
Yeah. I mean, that's my dog 90% of the day. He's two. Yeah.
So yeah, so no, those are the two big things we're working on, and then
Mm,
and then sort of in line with the building of the facility is the development of supply chain contracts and sort of figuring out, for the level of cultivation and the level of output we're looking at here, there's going to be other brands that come in and utilize our infrastructure and ecosphere, because output is sort of a bottleneck, especially on the high end in the California market. There's just there's sort of some supply chain issues that we're trying to work out, and so there's a lot of brands who basically all they have is a brand,
mm,
and they just buy product white label. They buy unbranded product,
mm.
and if it meets their quality standards, they slap their brand on it. That's
Yeah.
a very, very common business model in
Mm.
California.
Yeah, I had actually seen um a lot of like issues with that within like the CBD industry. And so I was seeing that there was like a huge post that like blew up on the subreddit about CBD, and it was basically like they're getting, I don't know, something to the extent of like almost gallons for like, tens of dollars basically, and then reselling it at, 15, $30 for, 30 milliliters kind of thing.
Absolutely. No, I mean, there's a big disconnect between there's like folks that are just sitting on tons of it that just want it gone. They know what their cost of goods are. They want it gone. And then there's a disconnect because the consumer doesn't realize what that cost of goods is. And so there are definitely situations where people are getting ripped off.
Mhm.
A lot of snake oil salesmen out there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like anything, right? Like, anything that becomes the new hype. I remember my cousin. Do you remember James at all? I don't know how much you really like ever interacted with him. It's
Probably. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember him, I think Ray Allen or somebody else was talking about deer antler oil or some shit. And he was
Oh, well.
buying that. And it was like, what the fuck is deer antler oil? Like, what are you talking about? And he was like taking it. He's like, yeah, it's going to fix my shoulder. And I'm just like, dude, there's almost no way that this is going to work out for you.
Right. Yeah. Like I'd like to see some data on
Yeah.
that. I'd like to
Yeah.
see some empirical data.
Yeah. So I guess like what's the beginnings in terms of like you deciding, okay, like I mean, realistically you're also in Weed, California, so growing weed in Weed, California is almost like a
Yeah.
no-brainer.
Actually it was not purposeful at all. It
Mhm,
was really just happenstance.
mhm,
So there's 3 towns around the mountain. There's Mount Shasta, Dunsmuir to some extent, and McLeod.
mhm,
And then there's an entire different part of the county that's north, that's more like cattle country, that's lower elevation,
mhm,
a lot hotter during the summer. And I moved up here to be near the mountain.
mhm,
I did not move here to live in Weed. In fact, I don't actually even live in the city limits. That's
mhm,
just the closest town to me. So that's where my address says.
mhm,
But no, that was not purposeful. The town was founded by a guy named Abner Reed.
mhm,
It's just pure happenstance, and
mhm,
it I really moved here for the natural environment, and it just really kind of played out well, I suppose. I got lucky.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
how do you start the business?
yeah. So, well, prior to legalization in California, which was a thing called Prop 64, which was a voter initiative that passed several years ago. California cultivation was under a medical law called Proposition 215, which was also a voter law, a voter initiative law that passed in 1996, the Compassionate Care Act. And I moved here for a variety of reasons. One, the natural climate for cultivation is amazing. It's an incredible microclimate for cannabis cultivation in terms of the aridity, in terms of the declination of sun. Places along the coast where cannabis cultivation in Mendocino and Humboldt is far more deeply ingrained in their societies and their cultures, quite frankly, have some systemic issues, particularly in terms of mold, because of the coastal winds, the wet coastal winds that we simply don't have here. We're a bit more inland.
Mm,
Also, we are not on PG&E, which is the utility provider for most of California. So we actually pay like half per kilowatt hour on power versus the rest of California.
wow.
So the combination of me knowing people up here so I had kind of a crew. Like I had friends that were up here as well.
Hmm.
So I had sort of a community. That's huge because farming is all about community. We used to, as a way to mitigate labor costs, we'd all just trade with each other. So there were like, at one point, there were like 6 or 7 of us who were all really tight.
Mm,
And we'd all just throw down like we'd be at one guy's farm for 3 days, 10 of us all throwing down.
mm,
And then you take a day off, you go to the next guy's farm for 3 days. And I'm talking about now transplant and like
mm,
harvest season when you need lots of hands on deck. So we'd all just kind of trade labor with each other. So we
mm,
didn't have to hire anybody. Um, it just made it cheaper, kind of like
mm.
Amish people doing the barn raises, right? The whole
Yeah,
community just comes together and gets the job done real as fast as possible.
yeah.
So the fact that I had community up here, the fact that I had done my homework on the growing conditions and the climate, the fact that the county at that time was all good to go under medical. You could have your plants under your doctor's prescription, and the fact that I had dispensaries in San Francisco who wanted me to grow and wanted that sort of decentralized supply chain model, where they'd sort of stake you, although it wasn't codified in contracts. It was all handshakes, and it was all like
Mm,
your word was your bond, because we didn't have access to the legal system, quite
yeah.
frankly. um, and so those factors, combined with the power consumption,
Mm,
which is huge when you look at facilities down in Southern California that are paying literally twice as much for power as we do up here. It's
yeah.
just that's a huge consideration.
What leads to that? Like, how come PG&E charges double?
It has a lot to do with the structure of the company. So PG&E is notorious for sort of ripping off customers, deferring maintenance. PG&E has been found to be at least somewhat complicit in some of these fires that are caused by deteriorating power infrastructure. And there's lots and lots of articles if you want to go look into that.
Mm,
They've been paying out huge corporate bonuses to executives while they defer all this maintenance.
mm,
Uh, Pacific Power, which is, first of all, it feeds from cheaper energy sources from hydroelectric in the Pacific Northwest. So that's
mm,
a big consideration. And then it's also I forget the exact nomenclature. It's not a public utility district, but it is less private than PG&E in that, they can't defer maintenance costs by virtue of the contracts that they have with the jurisdictions in which they serve.
mm,
So that's a big one. So Pacific Power is the company out here, and yeah, the twofold factors. One being the fact that it's run a bit more like a public utility,
mm.
and also the fact that the power literally comes from cheaper sources,
Yeah.
underlying sources, right? The
Mm.
hydroelectric.
Yeah, I think there's something to do with the hydroelectric further, like not in California, but like further north, that is actually being used for like crypto mining, like Bitcoin mining.
Oh, big time,
Yeah,
big
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's some big time, mining rig operations that are up there that also use it for like a cooling standpoint too, because, yeah. So, definitely
No,
pretty awesome.
it's one of the cheapest places in the whole country for power, and that's why you actually see centralization of large mining facilities in the Pac Northwest, because it is, even on a national scale, it's like some of the cheapest power.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great opportunity for you, and it sounds like the climate is perfect, and I'm jealous of the location because I hate the city.
Yeah. Well, you'll come out and visit sometime, my
Yeah,
friend.
yeah,
I
of
guess
course.
it's worth letting people know here that Mr. Savage and I have known each other since like day one.
Yeah, like toddlerhood.
Yeah. Our parents are old friends and we grew up together and
Hmm.
uh yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and thanks for reaching out and asking me to do this.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's I to be honest, I was this is all kind of like semi new news as far as everything goes, but I was unaware of like quite how far along you were in terms of success, and I was just kind of like that would be cool, and here we are, and it's honestly like you're much further along in the situation than I was expecting, and so this is even better than I was expecting because I get to share a part of the good news kind of thing.
No, that's awesome. And I guess that's a great place to segue back. You asked how do you start the company?
Mm,
Well, up until 2.5 years ago, the company didn't exist
mm,
because the structure was not there. Prop 64 had just passed, the regulations had not yet been drafted. You didn't have permits and business licenses. You just had a script from a doctor
mm,
that says you can grow, and you had paperwork from the patients that you were the caregiver for,
mm,
and it was all the dispensary was sort of the central hub of interaction there between the caregiver and the patients. And then when everything changed, it became a situation where we established we filed the LLC and the C corp paperwork for the parent company, and we pursued permitting here in the city. it there's a Gantt chart both on our website shastagrown.com and in the deck that you have that kind of shows how long it took from the inception of the idea to the actual issuance of the permits, which just finally happened this past November. We walked away with a unanimous vote at City Council,
mm.
which was amazing. And if you had told someone 5 or 10 years ago that there would have been a unanimous vote for a project of this nature, they would have told you that you were smoking too much ganja.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and the big thing that changed, the pivot that really changed the community's position on it, that changed some of the elected officials' positions on it, was when you started to crunch the numbers on job creation and
Mm,
on municipal revenue creation through taxation, right?
mhm.
So there's a very sort of an economically depressed area. The mill still employs about 150 people, but um, there's a lumber mill, right?
Mhm.
Just to be very, this is a mining and logging and ranching community, and a lot of those industries have been on the downturn for some time.
Mhm.
And so the idea of a new industry that could provide a central sort of job creation hub, by the end of it, we expect to employ about 300 people, which in a town of 2,500 is huge.
Yeah.
That's enormous. And at $20 an hour, so we're paying, and that's $20 an hour is the minimum wage at our facility. We
Mm,
agreed to that as a component of our permit issuance. That was something that we offered the city. We said, listen, we believe in living wages. We believe in not keeping people in poverty. And
yeah.
so, this was our business plan from day one. We wanted to provide living wage jobs, and that was something that, when it was discussed in the community, was seen as one of the real tangible benefits of approving this project.
Mhm. Now,
So
what's the
yeah,
what's
go
the
ahead.
average salary in wheat, if you don't mind me
Oh
asking?
man, it's low. I forget it off the top of my head, but it's below the poverty line
Uh-huh.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's not good.
So this will be a job that people really vie for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know several folks here who struggle. They work two minimum wage jobs, and
Mhm.
yeah, they'd much rather just work one job and put their all into it, especially at, we're good, we're going to be a big enough company that we'll be offering, health insurance benefits. We'll be offering some other sort of employee compensation packages, for people that are higher up in the hierarchy. There'll be some bonus structures, some revenue sharing bonus structures based upon output, right? So,
Mhm.
if you're in charge of a greenhouse and that greenhouse exceeds what we're anticipating for it in terms of overall like output of biomass,
Mhm.
you did a really good job.
Yeah.
You get a piece of that, right?
Yeah.
And that incentivizing that behavior in employees is huge, because when people are working for minimum wage, it's what's that joke? It's like people are only working hard enough to not get fired,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As opposed to working to like really make the company more solvent. And
Mhm.
yeah, so that's big.
Yeah. Yeah. I think. I mean, I think that that's obviously impactful. I also think that, working in a space that does allow growth is also impactful, like that people can have a future in, and that's also impactful. And so then, to offer on top of that a bonus structure, that's also great. I mean, you guys, I also wanted to hit, if you had more to say, we can also hold this off, but I wanted to talk about your educational plan in terms of getting people ready to work with your company.
Yeah, no, and I want to I'm actually looking up to double check because I don't want to misquote the dates,
Mhm,
but there is an online sort of a seminar. It's a continuing technical education course through College of the Siskiyous, which is the local community college we have here in Weed,
mhm,
and it is a 4-class program on cannabis and hemp.
mhm,
It is April 17th and 18th. You can look up College of the Siskiyous online, and there is you can register for it. And it's 4 classes, and I wrote the syllabus. It's covering the science, law, politics, and history, as well as basic farming practices for cannabis and hemp.
mhm,
And that was a program that we decided to pursue, and we sort of lobbied the educational institution to allow for, because kind of like in the Midwest when a lot of the manufacturing facilities closed in the Rust Belt and they had re-education programs for folks who lost their jobs to do coding. That's kind of the model that we're envisioning. So we're hoping that people who have been, hit by economic downturn and who are, underemployed or not working where they'd like to be working, they have an opportunity to come learn a set of skills that kind of give them the red carpet into a living wage job.
mhm,
And so yeah, we're really excited about that. That's going to be April 17th and 18th. Like I said, it's going to be online for now because of COVID, but eventually it will be an in-person class with workshops. And, once our facility is up and running, it will also include like hands-on.
mhm.
We're going to have a partnership with the college where the people taking those classes can come and see what it really looks like, on boots on the ground, so to speak.
Mhm. That's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's one of those things where like you're really generating change within the community, and that's deeply impactful. And then, I think it's one of those things where, Walmart lobbies to keep the minimum wage low, but they also fight to keep, welfare benefits high, and 30 something percent of welfare benefits are respent back at Walmart. And it's
Oh,
like,
Walmart. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's like to have that kind of like, circular system of just, poverty and unhealthiness and, not making enough to ends meet. And it just keeps going,
Yeah. And
and
it's the late stage capitalism of sold to the company store, right?
yes, yes. And
And
you
we used to
guys,
have that.
oh
We
yeah.
used to have that here. So the mill, this was a company town.
Mm,
The city did not incorporate until 1961. Prior to 1961, you could only live here if you worked at the mill. The mill owned all the housing. The
wow.
mill owned all the infrastructure. The mill owned everything. It was a company town like they have in West Virginia, like they have
Uh-huh.
in upstate New York, like that,
Yeah.
that model. And at the historic Weed Lumber Museum, they have the original box machine that was like how they counted your script. So you could go to the store, and if you didn't have money, you could buy things, and they'd make a note, and it got taken out of your next paycheck.
Oh man.
And it was like it's like a lock box with like
Yeah.
old school analog mechanical. It's like it was crazy, and it's really wild. And so yeah, there's a lot of folks that know that history and they want to see that change, right?
Mhm.
So that was definitely something that we were able to kind of hammer on.
Yeah.
Like yeah, rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Exactly, exactly. I mean, that as far as like the corporate town kind of model, like that almost sounds like indentured servitude because like you get paid, but all that money goes right back in. Like I got to pay
Right.
rent, that goes back to the company. Food goes back to the company. Like they
Every-
set the prices, so it's
They do.
yeah,
Totally.
it
And like early in its stages, now I know folks who are multi-generational families here, and you talk to their grandparents who worked at the mill in
mm,
the 30s and 40s,
mm,
the real old timers. There was a degree of benevolence. There was a degree of corporate benevolence where,
mm,
it really was that, they'd take care of you as long as you worked hard.
mm,
You didn't want for anything. In fact, your quality of life was higher than a lot of other people's,
mm,
because the mill and the ownership structure knew that it was in their best interest to keep employees productive and happy.
mm,
Um, so yeah, weed used to be the happening spot around here because it was the biggest lumber mill and people had the most money to spend.
mm,
And very more so than some of the other towns in our community that were kind of more like, we have this county is huge. It's 45,000 people. It's, I forget the square mileage, but it's like the size of a small state, basically.
Mhm.
Um, I'm exaggerating slightly, but
Yeah.
and so you have you have a side of the mountain that's all ag and all cattle, and then you have these they call them intermountain communities that were all logging, and then out west you have all these mining towns, and there was a high degree of segmentation, between who was doing well when, in terms of like the decades, right? So in
Mhm.
late 1800s, early 1900s, the mining towns were the boom towns.
Mhm.
And then in the early 1900s, mining was still going on, but that's when cattle was introduced. And then the lumber industry really took off, and they expanded the mill and all, and so there's this sort of cycle of almost like that boom and bust cycle with
Mhm.
industries that you see all over the place here in Siskiyou.
Mhm.
And there's really been nothing to replace it, because now cattle ranching is sort of stagnant. You have your land, how many head of cattle you can put out. The prices are pretty standard. Mining has all but stopped here. The federal government stopped renewing mining claims along the Klamath River for gold
Mhm.
in the late 90s. They just were like, oh, no more, we're
Yeah.
done. And so a lot of people lost their livelihood. And then, yeah, the timber industry has really, really declined as well.
So what kind of impact do you guys think that you're going to have on the community?
Well, I hope a really a profound one. I hope that this becomes a company that is viewed with pride by the people in our town, in our community, that we're providing a service to people. We're providing a good to people, not a service, a good. But we're providing something that people need, that ought never to have been deemed illegal in the first place.
Mhm.
There's a lot of pride in the agricultural output of our county. There's some strawberry nurseries that in fact I'm wearing their hat right now, that like they're some of the biggest strawberry nurseries in the country, and
Mhm.
it's because of innovation. They grow the strawberry starts at a really high elevation, and then when they drop them down to like at 4,000 foot, and they drop them down to 700 foot above sea level, and they just fruit like crazy. And that was an innovation that like came from Siskiyou.
Mhm.
Out in Tule Lake, they grow a lot of horseradish and garlic and onions, and so there, when a community has pride in what they produce, I think that's a big component. And right now there's been a lot of apathy in our community about just the decline. Like, you go down Main Street in Weed,
Mhm.
and 2/3 of the buildings are shuttered and in disrepair, and
Mhm.
the old timers tell you, oh, that used to be this and that used to be that, and now they're just closed.
Yeah.
So I really hope that this becomes a jumpstart to an economic revitalization of the community, because you have people that have good living wage jobs, they tend to spend their money locally.
Mhm.
And you're also going to have situations where people move here, and either their family members or their significant others start businesses. And, it's kind of a potential, yeah, jumpstart is a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would be, I mean, awesome, right? Like that's definitely a good karma checkbox.
Yeah. And also, the numbers also work for
Yes.
financially. It's
Yes.
like, yeah. So you get that duality, right? It's
Mhm.
like you're doing the right thing, but it also works out really well. Like,
Yeah.
it's good.
That's
It's
the
a
happy medium. Happy.
positive reinforcement. Yeah, yeah.
So I remember like the last time that I saw you, which was I think like 4 or 5 years ago, right? Give or take. And you were talking about, like what you were doing in terms of actual like grunt work, right? And so
Yeah.
there was, talk about, you know, back guano and stuff like that. And
Mhm. Oh yeah.
do you want to talk about like, are you able to talk about like what goes into your facility in terms of like, what's unique and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
renewable and
So
stuff
we
like that?
pride ourselves on what people sort of call probiotic cultivation, or living soil web cultivation.
Mm,
So the idea is to create a truly like biodynamic living soil that induces the plant's growth in such a way that um, sort of highlights the inherent natural characteristics of the plant.
mm,
So we're all about organics. We don't use fertilizer in the classic sense of the word, like
mm,
inorganic fertilizers. But yeah, I mean, just to contextualize, yeah, I mean, for the first 8, 9 years I was out here, I was doing the work. I was mixing soil. I was tending the plants. I was
Mhm.
doing the actual cultivation, hands on, hands in the dirt, as we say.
Yeah.
And now that's sort of changed. Now I spend a lot of time in front of a computer, a lot of time on conference calls, a lot of times doing document generation and different things like that. So the work has definitely shifted from, yeah, last time we spoke when I was still really in the thick of the cultivation
Mhm.
to now where it's more of a traditional business hierarchical structure. So
Mhm.
CEO does CEO work. I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not in the garden all the time. But luckily, I have an amazing co-founder, Matthew Dodson, who is just one of the greenest thumbs I've ever met, and he's just so enthusiastic and so knowledgeable about, he about the horticulture and about the botany.
Mhm.
And so, at that point, that's a classic Steve Jobs, right? You've got to hire people that know more than you.
Mhm.
Because, if you have a good idea, that's one thing. But if you can't find people that have the knowledge base to execute on that idea, because you can't be everywhere at once, you
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we use a lot of so yeah, the idea behind probiotic farming, and there's some great books. One of them is called Teaming with Microbes, TEAMING with Microbes.
Mhm.
Um, that are sort of opuses on natural farming. It's akin to Korean natural farming, KNF, and JDAM, JADAM, or hugel culture. So these are like kind of old world style techniques of utilizing extant biomass just to create healthy compost and soil that you have, um, basically microbes eating the nutrients that are in that soil and breaking them down into bioavailable nutrients for the plants to uptake.
Mhm.
So that's without, that's the long and the short of it, is basically you're just feeding the microbes, and then the microbes feed the plant. You're not necessarily feeding the plant. The
Mhm.
analogy that's often utilized, and actually there's a gentleman that dropped it the other day in a room on Clubhouse, and I hit him up. I was like, I love that you just use that metaphor. I use it all the time. It's the difference between foie gras, where you're like shoving the nutrients that you think the plant needs,
Mhm.
versus like just providing a buffet and the plant gets to use whatever it wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it produces healthier plants. I mean,
Mhm.
unequivocally, unequivocally.
Yeah. I think. I mean, to that point, right? Like anytime you're using some kind of like artificial, whatever shortcut, it tends to have, you know, not the exact benefits, right? Like it's never equal, right? Like that, the shortcut never generates, the same healthy kind of food or the healthy kind of plant. There's always some kind of nutrient that's been missing or something to that extent.
Absolutely, and we always say the proof is in the puffin, man. You can tell the way the ash burns, right? You can tell the way the nug structure looks.
Mhm.
If there's plant growth regulators, if you're using artificial nutrients, you kind of get those like denser, rockier buds. You don't have the same nodal structure. Um, and yeah, the flavor profile is really profound. You can elicit approximately similar cannabinoid
Mhm.
representation in the plant. Like you can make it produce THC because that's what the plant does.
Yeah.
Where you really lose it, and where the real disconnect is the flavor profile and the user experience therein. So
Mhm.
you just get more flavorful, you get more essential oil productions and more terpene productions.
Mhm.
And yeah, you just don't you that's the real difference versus organic, the in terms of the output of product. But
Mhm.
in organic farming, you just get healthier, tastier ganja.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to that point, right? Like you're clearly the expert, and so I'm gonna probably butcher this in terms of even asking the question. But for a pot, right? Like if you are growing it through, whatever, less organic means, is there differences in terms of the profile? Like they can get it to, the THC, whatever, XYZ percentage, but is it missing out on that, like, terpene, CBD, and all those like secondary benefits and,
Yeah,
components?
yeah, exactly. You don't get as broad a cannabinoid profile. So
Mhm.
you're right, all the minor cannabinoids tend to express less, and the terpenes and the flavor profile even more so.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of interesting thoughts on that in the industry, and you get, it's unfortunate, right? Because somebody's keeping Steel Reserve and Mad Dog 2020 in business, right? There's
Mhm.
always people that are going to buy $2 Chuck.
Mhm.
But for those folks who are connoisseurs, for those folks who want the utmost experience,
Mhm.
Organic cannabis is just far superior in terms of the user experience and the flavor profile and the way the plant smells.
Mhm.
I joke I like smelling weed better than I like smoking it sometimes,
Mhm.
because you just get these floral aromas and these incredibly unique and complex and in-depth profiles that, yeah, if you grow indoors with a hydroponic system or
Mhm.
with a drip system with inorganic nutrients, like you just really don't get that same experience.
Mhm. So
But yeah, you're absolutely correct. You hit the nail on the head, quite
okay,
frankly.
that was a
Yeah.
guess. It was a guess.
Yeah, yeah.
um.
It makes sense. It's common sense. Like, you treat the
Mhm.
plant right, you do it organically. I mean, it's the same thing with, it's the same thing with any produce, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's why people buy organic.
Yeah, yeah. So do you? I mean, to your earlier point, right? Like, can you at this point? I'm assuming this is a yes, but if you had like, two nugs in your hand, or if you smoke two different bowls, you can definitely tell like your quality versus the $2 Chuck quality.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I
You can tell by the way the nug looks. You can tell by the nose on it when you smell it, and then yes, absolutely, in consuming it, you do. Now, when you extract the cannabinoids for introduction into, like, say, an edible,
mhm,
then you kind of lose that. And so one of the reasons that people are willing, and why the business model is still solvent on
mhm,
producing, kind of mid-shelf grade cannabis, is because once you strip it of its molecular components and you reintroduce those into a consumer packaged good, be it a edible or an under the tongue drop or
mhm,
whatever the case may be, those products, the botanical characteristics of the plant don't translate.
mhm,
um, the really one of the few concentrate categories where it does translate is what we call fresh frozen or live resin,
mhm,
where you're actually doing an extraction of the plant and its terpenes, and it's representative of what that plant smells and like and tastes like
mhm,
as a raw plant.
mhm,
Whereas for edibles and some of the other kind of downstream consumer packaged goods, it just doesn't really matter that much.
mhm. Would they still be missing in that secondary characteristic, like in that organic versus $2 Chuck comparison? Like, will the
Oh
sub
yeah,
label still have you might not be able to taste it, but still have that additional profile if somebody wants those benefits?
absolutely. And there's a lot of burgeoning research on what people call the entourage effect, which is basically, your brain has an endocannabinoid system. Your brain has cannabinoid receptors, and what they're finding out more and more is that the essential oils and the terpenes, and even some of the minor cannabinoids of the plant, really impact how your brain uptakes through your CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Mm,
So when you strip the plant of its essential oils, and you're just like, you get either, you can have CBD isolate, you can have delta 8 THC, you can have just straight delta 9 THC isolate, right?
mm,
When you separate out those constituent components, you really see a hampering of your brain's ability to uptake those cannabinoids through your receptor systems, whereas a full spectrum product is what you would call, what you're describing, a full spectrum product, where it's
mm,
all of the constituent molecular components of the plant being put into a product, have much higher efficacy rates in terms of end user experience. And the way that we saw that, the way that sort of anecdotal data arose, was through the medical use of the plant,
mm,
where folks would have, and especially, I'm one of the more powerful things that I got to witness was a child's seizure being stopped by the use of a full spectrum CBD oil, like stopped in its tracks, and it sends shivers down my spine to think about it.
yeah.
Um, and you talk to cancer patients, you talk to folks who use it for PTSD
Mm,
or for degenerative physiological muscular conditions, whatever the case may be. Across the board, they will tell you that full spectrum products are more effective medicines. And
mm.
the reason is because a full spectrum product, it maximizes the uptake efficiency of your endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It was something that I was like researching because like I have psoriasis, and so then I was trying out like the CBD route because I can't smoke pot because of work, and
Right, because
so
we're great.
yeah, and so with that being
That'll
the case,
change soon.
yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm just whatever it is, it
It
is.
is what it is. Right?
um, but as far as that goes, like, I was looking into like the CBD and then like the terpenes, and then like I can't have more than, I forget what it is, like zero point 0.3 THC. So then I have to kind of
Yeah.
like stick more to the isolates, or at least companies who are posting, the I forget what it's called, spectrog. I don't know. I can't think of the word.
Oh,
It's
a COA, like a certificate of analysis.
yes,
Like,
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
No,
and so
absolutely. That's yeah, that and there have been cases where people have lost their jobs and there's been all sorts of bullshit because yeah, they're buying gas station CBD, they have no idea
yeah,
what's in it and it's not what it says it is.
yeah,
But there are reputable companies out there
mhm,
that, you can safely utilize those products without that fear, but yeah, you want to see the data. You want to see that certificate of analysis. You want to see some of the companies go so far as to have a QR code so you can
mhm,
like scan it and it'll show
yeah,
you like this product was grown at this farm. This was the batch number. Here's where it was tested. Here's
mhm,
where it went to be manufactured. Basically how did it get to you from a
mhm,
farm? And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to have kind of QR codes on the labeling so that people can learn about what they're ingesting.
mhm,
A big movement within the cannabis industry has to do with consumer education. We like to say that we have a notoriously uneducated consumer base. People know that they like weed. People
mhm,
know they want weed. They don't necessarily understand what's in their weed.
yeah,
And I think that as we as an industry alleviate that pressure and we educate consumers more, people are going to find more products that work for them,
mhm,
right? Like, everyone's got a story about their friend that smoked weed and had anxiety attack and got all paranoid. Well, maybe you shouldn't be smoking something that's super high in limonene, right?
yeah,
Because that has been known to cause that effect. And or the other way, right? Somebody ate too much of an edible and slept for 48 hours. And it's
yeah,
like, well, maybe you should know how many milligrams are in that product so you
yeah,
can titrate your dosage. And yeah, I mean that's on us as an industry. That's something that we work with the regulatory agencies and in states where it's legal. There's mandated labeling requirements. You have to say how much of what is in a product, and that allows consumers to sort of understand what they like, and then walk into a shop and say, hey, I want something that's XYZ because they know that works for them.
yeah. Yeah, that's definitely steps in the right direction, and it's nice. I mean, just like anecdotally hearing from people going into like weed shops, they always hire people who are connoisseurs themselves, right? Like they're advocates
That's
for it,
good.
educated on it, like the whole nine. Like, what are you trying to do with this? Are you trying to go for a walk? Are you trying to sink into the couch and
Mhm.
watch TV? And so
Yeah.
yeah, hiring those kinds of experts. I wanted to actually, that was actually a question that I wanted to ask, and so I wanted to bounce back to it. Can you talk more on the full spectrum live resin? I don't know. I only really know guys who edibles and smoke herb, and so I don't know what live resin is. I've never witnessed it.
Sure. So live resin is a smokable concentrate. Oftentimes people call it dabs,
Mhm.
I guess
Okay.
prefer as the
Okay. I
nomenclature.
do know
But
that.
yeah, well, dabs is any sort of smokable concentrate. That's kind of like a blanket catch-all term. What live
Mhm,
resin means is that you're extracting the plant in such a way to create a true representation of the constituent components of the plants, the aromatics, the flavonoids, and the cannabinoids, the psychoactive components, into a concentrate that is of a higher percentage, right? So you're smoking, less is more, so to speak,
mhm,
right? You get the same amount of THC in a dab the size of, a quarter of your pinky nail has the same amount of THC as like smoking half a joint.
mhm,
And people like that, and the delivery rate, the uptake rate through your areoli is very fast, so you're medicated very quickly.
mhm,
But live resin is a phrase. So what we do, the minute that you cut a plant down, the minute that you kill a plant, you start losing constituent molecular components.
mhm.
The most volatile aromatics are literally degrading, they're vaporizing at room temperature.
Okay.
And so the idea is to cut a plant down and immediately freeze it. And by freezing it, you trap and you cease that vaporization of aromatics.
Mhm,
And then when you extract the plant, and you actually see it in a volumetric yield difference, where a dried plant will yield significantly less liquid terpenes that you can extract out of the plant using a solvent
mhm,
than if the plant is fresh frozen and hasn't degraded, because those aromatic compounds have molecular mass. And so when they're aggregated and extracted, that molecular mass actually translates to milligrams of product.
Mhm.
And then eventually you get big enough into liters of product, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so the idea is to create a smokable concentrate that is as representative of that plant's botanical nature as possible. That's the long and the short of it. Full spectrum is a very similar concept, but full spectrum can also be a non-smokable, a non-combustible. So you can have a full spectrum RSO or a Rick Simpson oil or Phoenix Tears, a FICO, a full and when it's a non-combustible, what you're really talking about is more what I had been discussing prior, where by maintaining a stable molecular composition that's representative of that plant's botanical nature, um, you have more efficacy of uptake and the medicine is better. So even though you can't really smell it, like if you smell a full spectrum sublingual, it's not like you get those notes or anything. I don't want to make it sound like that. It more has to do with the uptake in the endocannabinoid receptor. When you do a full spectrum or a fresh frozen in a smokable, it has a lot to do with flavor, but less so in an under the tongue or
Mhm.
a dropper or whatever.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess to pivot, I mean, if you do smoke, if you don't smoke, like, what is your route of choice in terms of smoking or
Oh,
intake?
I'm pretty old fashioned. I got a bong sitting here. I just I don't, again, because my work has sort of shifted. My consumption has plummeted from years past because
Mhm.
I just find that sort of a delayed gratification, if I wait and then just smoke at night, helps me sleep. That's a little better. And a lot of the stuff that I'm doing now in terms of interacting with regulatory agencies, financial institutions, et cetera, I just if I'm stoned, my reaction time is just a little laggier.
Mhm.
Now, when we're talking about doing facility design and talking about like high level, like kind of creative stuff, that's different. But
Mhm.
man, when someone's grilling me on numbers in a spreadsheet and I'm stoned, I'm like, oh dude, no, not
Bad
right
idea.
now. Bad idea. Luckily we have an amazing a CFO, an amazing CFO friend of mine from undergrad at UF,
Mhm.
who's come on board, who really, that's his arena. So if someone starts asking me about spreadsheets, I kind of be like, Greg, you want to take this one?
Yeah.
And it's, but that's delineation of responsibility in a
Mhm.
corporate structure. I mean, that's, tale as old as time.
Yeah. So I do you know Lex Fridman? He has a podcast. He's been on Rogan a couple times.
I don't know.
No,
I'm unfamiliar.
he's extremely smart. I think that he's in like machine learning and stuff to that extent. But he started doing podcast people similar to Rogan's, but he comes from much more of like the analytical and like the intelligent side. And the guy's brilliant. He jokes around on his most recent podcast with Jason Calacanis. He's an angel investor who's affiliated with Chamath, who's one of the Facebook
Okay.
guys. But uh, basically, on that podcast, he was asking him like, what role does family, love, and friends play in your startup?
Hmm. It's huge.
I thought it was
It's
a
huge.
good question, so here we are.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, man. I mean, everyone. So again, our team profiles are on the website on shastagrown.com. Every single one of our founding team, I was a situation where I've known that person and I know their salt. They're worth their salt.
Mhm.
Um, we didn't have any big outside hires. We did it very organically, and it has fostered a culture where we all implicitly trust each other. We stay in our lanes, but we help each other when needed,
Mhm.
and that's something that we very consciously want to try and maintain as we expand and inevitably start hiring people from outside of our comfort zones.
Mhm.
um, but it's a lead by example thing. If your C-suite, if your executives, if your founding team treat each other like family, then as you bring employees into the fold, they're going to see what that corporate culture is like, and they're going to see that that's how this runs, and hopefully it ingrains that behavior and perpetuates that behavior.
Mhm.
um, on the family and friends tip, I mean, almost every startup in the world, including our own, their original seed money came from family and friends,
Mhm.
right? Because people just, don't necessarily understand the business, don't even necessarily need to understand the business. They trust you and they trust your capabilities.
Mm.
And I'm very proud to say that we've already, elicited a situation where those folks that were early investors in our company are going to do really well. They're going to do great.
Awesome.
And as we move into more institutional rounds for 7 and 8 figures,
Mm.
it's a very different thing. But those, that's early stage direct investing. It's the risk and the reward, because there's for every success story, there's 10 failures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Uh,
Definitely.
so I didn't know enough. Another question that you happened to hit before I got a chance to ask it was about the live. Crap, I lost the term. It's
Resin.
yeah, no, not the live resin. The live. Jesus, I lost it. The roots, the live roots with like it seems to be much
Oh yeah,
more
yeah.
renewable
Living,
farming. I can't think.
yes.
Yes, and
Living soil web. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
living soil web. That was another question that I had written down that I tried to find in the thing and I wrote down on the Excel tab, but whatever. Um, so to that point, I think that our generation really likes renewables and stuff. From that aspect, and the organic is obviously another home run as far as your company is concerned. What other things are you doing that are renewable? Right, like is the greenhouse renewable? Are you going to have solar panels? Is there going to be aquifers? And yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we are. In fact, there's this company that's been developing. They've been around for a little bit, but the technology seems to have gotten a lot better doing transparent or translucent solar panels that actually magnify the magenta component of the UV spectrum, which is really healthy for the plants.
Mm.
So we're definitely going to have some internalized power production through solar and wind. We actually mocked up a model where, for our phase 2 project, we may even, if we engineer the fertigation system, so the watering systems right, and funnel everything back in to an output, that we could theoretically power a small turbine because of the volume of water that we're using.
Mm.
But a lot of that comes down to practices. Oh, my dog says hello here. Hi, Gertie. Say hi. A lot of that comes down to practices. We definitely plan on using LEDs and some lesser energy intensive environmental systems. And also we're gonna, because we're not utilizing salt-based liquid nutrients, we're gonna be able to recycle a lot of the water we use. So water, will basically go feed the plant, and then everything that comes out, the slurry that comes out, so to speak, the organic slurry,
Mm.
basically you put it through a filtration system, a separation system, and then that water can go back in to either cool your HVAC system or go in to your cleaning systems, right? So like you can separate out the water in a filter and then use that gray, they call it, it's gray water, right?
Mm.
It's like water that's been used once, and use that for cleaning purposes. And um, water around here is a very hot, not a hot button, but it's a very important topic, because the mountain here feeds the Sacramento River as well as the Shasta Scott and the Klamath rivers.
Mm.
It's the headwaters of the Sacramento River, which feed a lot of the agriculture in California. Um, I was actually one of 9 named citizens in a lawsuit over our town's municipal water supply. There was a there's articles about it. You can read
Mm.
about it. There was an article in the New York Times.
Mm.
We were sued over our citizen outreach, and that lawsuit was declared to be it's called a SLAP suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. They are illegal.
Mm.
They are oftentimes used by multinational corporations for people protesting things like fracking or pipelines or resource extractive industries like water.
Mm.
Bottling. In our case, it was a little different, and we were released from that lawsuit. The judge declared it to be, not properly done, and so I carry that really close to my heart, and so we're actually in talks with several different firms that want to help us design the facility. We do anticipate the facility to end up being LEED certified, right? So green buildings.
Mm.
I have friends in the hemp building material space that we want to see if we can utilize some of those building materials that are derived from industrial hemp.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, any and all. We try and remain sort of agnostic on a lot of things, trying not to be too dogmatic about what we want to see.
Mm,
And so, yeah, there's no shortage of opportunities for us when we're designing a facility and developing SOPs to keep sustainability and regenerative practices in mind. And it's a real deep part of our kind of my personal ethos and definitely my company's ethos, right?
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But the translucent solar panels are really cool. Yeah, they actually, it's like a 1-2 punch. Not only are you obviously using the solar panels, but the solar panels, because of the composite material, refract the light in such a way that it increases the magenta spectrum, which is what the plants most want, for especially for flower growth.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's like just
It's a win-win for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that was on the topic of renewables and stuff like that. The reason why this got started is because you liked one of my Facebook posts regarding like getting a Tesla. Do you think that you're going to end up getting like an electric vehicle?
Um, yeah, eventually, I think everyone's going to have one, right? I really do. I
Yeah.
think that lithium mining is definitely a problem when you look at battery technologies, and that's something that they're going to have to figure out in the years to come. But
Mm,
um, I would certainly be open to it. I've heard now, we get real winters out here, and I
mm,
drive on a lot of bumpy dirt roads. So I haven't seen the Cybertruck in action,
mm.
but like, the coupe model Teslas, I don't,
No.
that would be very difficult. It just,
Yeah.
I'd be hamstrung. Like where I go out, like mushroom foraging and
Mm,
stuff for morels and bolites and matsutakis,
mm.
you couldn't get out there in anything other than a 4-wheel drive pickup.
Yeah.
Like, or
Yeah.
you could, but it'd be rough.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was in Colorado and my buddy has a Forerunner and we were by Maroon Bells. Do you know the area?
I'm
No.
unfamiliar now.
So it's just it's a hiking, like it's a 14er range of mountains and stuff. And
Okay.
so we were like driving up to this like area to like get started. And my buddy's like, "You want to drive in? Like let's see how far we can go." And we were kind of like constrained on time because his wife wanted us back pretty quickly. So like, if we drive, it's a lot faster than walking. And, stuff like I'm assuming similar backcountry type stuff to what you're hiking through or, driving through. But dude, the Forerunner is such a monster. Like just rivers, like, well, small rivers, right? But just
Yeah,
absolutely
sure.
insane. And I don't know. I think
It can't do that in a Model S.
no, no, definitely not, definitely not.
So yeah, I think that rural areas are going to end up being some of the last adopters,
Mm,
because you just, from what, and I'm no expert or anything, but yeah, I mean, most of the electric cars you see are pretty low profile, pretty low
yeah.
to the ground. I look forward to hearing you got the truck, right?
I
I
ju-
saw that.
it's a year out. It's
Right.
it's just
You
a deposit, but
put
yeah,
the down, yeah, the deposit
it's
down.
$100
No,
deposit, which people overblow. Which I didn't realize people were gonna be like, "Holy shit, how much was like?" It was
yeah, yeah.
$100.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty low barrier to entry. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I look forward to the day that becomes a reality. But the fact of the matter is, for folks who work in ag,
Mm,
that drive around on farms and drive around on dirt roads and stuff,
mm,
there hasn't been an electric vehicle that can handle that.
yeah.
It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't exist yet. It will. It
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. I'm also. I mean, your dad like had the VW like camper bus. I'm excited for
Mhm.
the new VW uh electric like the minibus. They're coming out
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
again. Like it's like an 8-seater, full turnaround seats and
Uh
very
huh.
modular. But yeah,
Yeah. He actually sold the Ghost. He sold the pop up. But they're looking at getting a Sprinter van now, a decked out Sprinter van. My mom wants something with a bathroom in it. The Volkswagen was a little rustic for Denise.
understandable,
Yeah,
understandable.
yeah, totally, man.
I g- I guess in terms of well, two last questions because one I've decided is
Sure.
going to be the close for all the podcasts. But before that, what like secondary downwind effects do you think that you and your company are going to have? Right, like between the education, obviously, right, like in terms of the medicinal aspect of marijuana. But like how like do you think that you guys coming to market are really going to be trailblazing, the organic marijuana space and, just how impactful do you
Well,
expect to be?
I don't want to say trailblaze, because there have been people doing this since before I was born,
Uh,
right? I don't want to say that. Our goal as a company is pretty succinct. It's to develop um, an awareness of the City of Weed product logo so that consumers years from now on the national and international market, which is an absolute inevitability,
Mm.
there's a lot of pent up demand for Northern California cannabis because of the legacy, because of the history, because of the dankness, as we say. And the fact of the matter is that within cannabis, there is not yet a ubiquitously acknowledged certification mark for high quality product.
Mm.
And we have an opportunity to create a certification mark that consumers can see on a shelf and say, oh, product of City of Weed, regardless of what brand, right? Regardless of the brand. It has that product City of Weed logo. It came out of that facility. That means the cultivation practices are sustainable and regenerative. That means that the quality of the product is of the utmost. And that's really our goal. Um, I sat on the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Appellations Development Committee for
Mm.
cannabis. So the concept of an appellation is something that we lobbied for to be transposed into cannabis. And I'm very proud of the work we did in that group. And, it provides a legal protection. So just like, and folks out in Humboldt are all about it, man, like you can't say Humboldt grown unless it was grown in Humboldt.
Mm.
And likewise for us, you can't say it was grown on the slopes of Mount Shasta in the City of Weed unless it was grown on the slopes of Mount Shasta in the City of Weed.
Mm.
And so it goes back to that consumer education. It goes back to making sure that people understand that there is a difference. Weed is not just weed. And that stems from the whole black market, mentality where like you were lucky if your guy even had any
Yeah.
fucking weed. Like, excuse my language, but
Yeah.
you were just lucky if your guy had some or you could get a hold of him. And
Mm.
it wasn't like, unless you were very, very lucky, you didn't have options. You didn't, I got this, I got that, I got that. Here's the weed. Do you want the weed? Here's how much the weed costs, and that's a fading paradigm.
Mm.
And so for us, it's about adopting those sorts of standards that you see in other consumables, right? In chocolate, in tobacco, in wine, in alcohol, where the sourcing and the manufacturing practices matter, because the consumer is aware that those components make a better product or a more desirable product. So that's our goal here at Shasta Grown. The goal is to create an ecosphere where brands that want to provide top quality products and want to utilize infrastructure and want to utilize that certification mark of the product of City of Weed logo, they can do so. And that's and in turn we create living wage jobs for our community. We create a very robust revenue stream for the city, for schools and roads and firefighters and cops and all those other things that you gotta fund,
Yeah.
as a jurisdictional government.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. I mean, that's, a life of impact, right? Like to put it bluntly.
No, that's a great way to describe it, man. That's good. And I'm a lucky son of a bitch, man.
Yeah, I mean, you put the right man at the right time in the right place, right? Napa Valley of Weed in Weed,
Yeah.
California, right?
No, it really is. It's funny, man. When you take a step back and you look at it, it's like, how did this happen? Like
Yeah.
what? I moved here to get away from it all, man. I moved here because I found it. When I first moved here, I didn't have the internet for like over 5 years. When I first moved here, they hadn't even put in the new cell phone towers, which are now not that new. When I first moved here, I barely got 2 bars of service at my house. Like I had to walk up the hill if I wanted to FaceTime or something,
Mhm.
so I moved here because it was a rural area. I moved here because it was an area that was well suited for cannabis cultivation. And I moved here because I just loved it. If anyone's ever been out here, this part of Northern California, it's visually stunning. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're manifesting greatness, like as far as it
You,
goes.
you definitely manifest your own reality. I'm a big believer in that, dude.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that, if you want it bad enough, the universe is gonna put it in front of you.
Yeah. That's sort of what
Yeah,
happened, man. That's sort of what happened.
yeah.
It took us a while. There was a lot of initially there was a fair amount of resistance, of pushback from the community. Those sort of prohibitionist arguments, the reefer madness, especially unfortunately,
Mm.
especially in some of the older populations that were really really bought into the drug war, bought into that.
Mhm.
Um, we had a thing that was a regulatory advisory committee, permitting and regulatory advisory committee, where I basically spoke to along with some other colleagues in the space, and in conjunction with the chief of police was on the committee, and two of the city councilors, and the public works guy. A lot of people from the community came out to be a part of those meetings.
Mm.
And basically the takeaway was, and it was actually mentioned as one of the kind of final sign-off statements during that successful vote that we had in November. This is, if this was a Budweiser brewing facility, we would not be arguing about this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, and alcohol is unequivocally more societally deleterious than cannabis,
Yeah.
both
100%.
on a physical, on a human scale, on what it does to your body, and also what the at the time sergeant, now current chief of police here in town, was like, I got domestics that are alcohol fueled. I never walk into a stoner's house dealing with a domestic, or it's not as common. I'm
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
paraphrasing here, but that's a really important thing to note, that we already in our society allow substances which are more deleterious both on a personal health level and a societal level, and ganja is just something that for a variety of pretty abhorrent reasons was made illegal,
Yeah.
and it never ought to have been,
Yeah.
and so it's just it's kind of crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean the whole route, the history behind it is nuts. Rogan rants about it all the time in terms of like hitting that topic, and even hemp getting made illegal at the same time. You have Henry Ford hitting with like a baseball bat a hemp bumper,
Oh
and
yeah,
just absolutely an incredible substance in hemp that got hampered, and now we use less than renewable substances for the same thing that
absolutely.
hemp
No, I
could
mean,
actually accomplish.
the pharmaceutical industry, the DuPonts lobbied against it, the timber industry, the paper industry, the cotton industry, because hemp can supplant all of those things. And quite frankly, our company, the parent company is an economic development firm at its core. This cannabis project is our primary focus right now, but we do have other projects on back burners, including a hemp building materials facility out in that other part of the county I was describing earlier, where they
Mm.
grow a lot of garlic and onions and stuff, and they
Yeah.
want to do row crop hemp specifically for building materials. But
Mhm.
the 1942 U.S. government film, or 1939 maybe, Hemp for Victory,
Mm.
where like in sharp contrast to the prior 30 years of policy, because the Navy needed hemp for ropes, they were like, yo, y'all need to plant this. And the
Yeah.
government subsidized hemp plantings in this country
Mhm.
because they were needed for the war effort. Because that knowledge, that generational knowledge that hemp can be used for, for all the basic necessities. I have a buddy by the name of Tyler Hoff, who's an amazing hemprepreneur, he calls himself.
Mhm.
And hemp and Bulk Hemp Warehouse is his company. If anybody wants to check it out, the guy is legit, man. He was with me on the curriculum development committee, and he talks about it, and he's just so passionate. But hemp can provide your shelter, your clothing, and your food, right? The three basic human needs,
Yeah.
one plant. And it's amazing that there was a time in this country when information was so siloed and so segmented that you could push through legislation that was such a bold-faced kind of lie, right? I
Yeah.
mean, quite frankly, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, these Mexicans are smoking weed and they're not working hard enough on our farms. We
Yeah.
need to ban. What are
Yeah.
you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
that's insane. But that's what it was. The Reefer Madness videos from the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
It's insane, man. It's insane.
Yeah. So that was actually part of what I wanted to actually ask additionally. I realized I had three questions, not two. But
Sure,
so
sure. No,
there's
man. Take your time, man.
there's
No problem.
that. So that's other aspects in terms of like arms that your business wants to get into.
Mhm.
Hypothetically, 5, 10 years down the line, company's going great. You can kind of be a little. What's your next move as the Jeff Bezos of marijuana?
Oh man, no, that's not a moniker I want to self-apply on. No, no,
Well,
that's
success, the success aspect.
sure. Listen, I mean, we've put together an amazing team. We put together an amazing project. It's been really well received. It's kind of got a life of its own at this point. We've
Mm.
got enough into it that it's gonna for the amount of time and energy that I've put into curating and developing this project, it's going to come down to our ability as a team to bring in other people that can perpetuate that. It's not a one-man show. It's
Mm.
a 300-person corporation, and that's just one of the subsidiaries. In terms of my time, I'm very, very passionate about economic revitalization. I sit on, in fact, I have a Zoom call for tomorrow for the leadership committee of it's called the Siskiyou Revitalization Network. It's a aggregate of a number of different semi-public and private groups that, try and work towards economic revitalization of our community.
Mm.
And I really want to get into the hemp building materials. I think that is just huge, as far as societally transformative things go, the development of technologies. I mean, I mentioned lithium mining earlier. Well, guess what? You can make batteries from hemp because the way, and oh man, I'm going to misquote this, but they can, they can they can segment it out, and it mimics graphene in its conductivity, right? And I'm not an electrical
Mm.
engineer, so I don't want to get too deep into that, but you
Mm.
can certainly look it up. There are academic research programs and private industry research programs um, for hemp batteries and semiconductors
Mm.
of stuff of that nature, which, like the rare earth mining that we're currently doing to power our cell phones and everything is not sustainable
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
But I think that the building materials, hempcrete is an amazing product. That's a pretty low barrier of entry. Hemp fiberboard for buildings,
Mm.
and those are all stepping stones towards wide scale utilization of hemp based plastics. And I think that is absolutely going to be huge. Moving from a petrochemical based supply chain that, all of our products are based on, petrochemical plastics.
Mm.
If we can replace that with a regenerative, renewable source of plastics that provide the same end user functionality,
Mm.
that to me is incredibly powerful. So I hope to parlay the success that it looks like this project is gonna create and parlay that into the development of hemp building materials and hemp plastics.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah, I mean the dichotomy between hemp and cannabis is completely false. I mean,
mm.
it's the same plant. Like it's just a linguistic differential, right?
Mm.
They slap this one word on it if it has a certain molecular composition, and if it has a different one, it's this other thing. But it's the same plant,
Yeah.
right? It's just it's pretty wild, man. But yeah, that's what I'd like to do. I mean, just here locally, I think, we have some issues. We have some housing crises, so I think that hemp building materials could be used to alleviate some of those, because if you can have regionally sourced construction material and decrease the cost of housing for folks, I think that's a big societal pressure that we need to start looking at. Um, you know, yeah, I'm very blessed and grateful that it looks like this particular project and the success we are having and look to be having with it is going to allow me the ability to kind of focus my energies on the next big thing. And that's a blessing, man. I'm
Mm.
so lucky.
I mean, ton of hard work and effort on top of
Oh yeah,
the
listen, I've been busting my hump on this for quite some time here. I mean,
yeah.
we just for context too, we had almost a year delay in our approvals.
Mm.
We had to, every month we're burning cash, right? We're burning cash every month.
Mm.
And because of some city stuff with the retirement of a gentleman that worked in the city, and then impacted with COVID and had to wait for the new city manager. We had almost a year delay, but quite frankly, the universe works in mysterious ways, as we all know. And if we had walked away with our approvals, instead of this past November, the prior November, right before the pandemic hit and capital markets just tightened, like I don't know what.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would have been worse for our company's success potential than what's actually happened. Where, yeah, it was a rough 8 or 10 months, but we kept to the timeline. All the parties involved kept to their word, and we did what we had to do, and we were able to kind of pick up where we left off. Basically, from December to August was the delay,
Yeah.
and we picked up where we left off in December and in the following August. And yeah, if we had been trying to raise a couple $1 million in the middle of the pandemic, I don't think we would have gotten traction. Whereas
Mm.
now capital markets are loosening. It looks like federal deregulation is relatively imminent, and
Mm.
it's going to be it's a brave new world, man. Once the SAFE Act passes and we have access to FDIC financial institutions, and we're not just hamstrung by private equity and VC funds.
Mm.
That'll be huge.
Exciting times. The pivot
Definitely,
point, right?
definitely, definitely. You betcha.
So
Yeah.
I guess to close out is a question that I like asking people, and you kind of touched on it, but what do you think your purpose in life is?
Oh man, I'm just this is, it's so funny that this is my bio across all social medias. I'm just a human trying to acquire and disseminate knowledge. That's it. I know I'm good at learning,
Mm.
and turns out I'm halfway good at teaching. And if I can, with my life, if I can just spread knowledge of any and all sort, just increase the overall kind of vibrational awareness of people. And like, people are so caught in the rat race, they're just worried about where their next meal is going to come from sometimes, right?
Mm.
They don't have time they don't have the time or bandwidth to really better themselves and see where they fit into the betterment of society. And I sound like a fucking Star Trek episode right now, but it's real, man. That's real. And so, yeah, that's what I'm all about, man. I'm just about acquiring knowledge and then disseminating it where it needs to get put.
It needs to happen. It needs to
Yeah,
happen.
definitely.
All right. I mean, that's it for me. I don't have any other
No.
questions.
Well, dude, it was an absolute pleasure, man. Thank you so much. It was good to see you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
First
I
time in a
mean,
while.
yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Last time I was back in Breezy was when my dad's mother passed, and
Mm.
I'm gonna come back once this COVID stuff,
Mm.
Liz Lang and Ben are getting hitched. So, I'll be back for the wedding. So I'll see you then.
All right, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'll be
Yeah.
around. I'll definitely,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Oh yeah.
Whatever is able to be accomplished.
Right, right. And listen, I mean, you ever, the offer stands,
Mm.
I look forward to showing you around out here. I view it as an eventuality.
I'll be out there. I'll be out there.
Definitely, dude.
Dude, thank you so
Definitely.
much for the time and
Oh,
congrats on
you're
the
very
success, man.
welcome. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the kind words, and thank you for having me on. Yeah, good luck with all this. I got a couple of potential candidates for this too. I'll circulate it to some buddies.
All right. Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's welcome.
I know some interesting people. Yeah.
Everybody's welcome, man.
Awesome, dude. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one, man. Yeah.
Bye.
Peace. Thank you for tuning into the Savage Talks podcast. I hope that you guys found that to be as educational and world opening for yourself as it did for me. And I hope that you guys liked it. I mean, I think that there was a ton of learning. I'll be sure to post on my Facebook and my Twitter when he posts the actual link for the sign up for the course that he is giving or that he created that is, a part of that local community college, because I do believe that it is online. But, if you wanted to work into the space and get into it, that's definitely a step in the right direction. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully, there's some good learning involved, and I hope, you had fun. So appreciate the time as always. Thank you. Peace. Stay safe.